Hey, this is Man-Made Mead, and I'm back with another mead video today. This is the January monthly mead. So what we're going to be doing is creating a banana strawberry mead. Now, it's something that I've never tried before. I found the recipe online and I thought it was really interesting. Contrary to what the recipe says to introduce the strawberries into the primary fermentation. I'm actually going to put them into the secondary. In the recipe as well, it said put the bananas into the secondary. So I'm going to put them both in the secondary. Now, the difference, I won't go into it in extremes, between primary and secondaries. Primary is your first part of your fermentation, meaning where the bulk of your honey and the bulk of your yeast, they change the gravity from its higher level to a lower level. And so the secondary fermentation, there's still fermentation happening, but the bulk of the fermentation has gone by. So I'm going to add the fruit into the secondary in hopes that they will they keep their flavor as when you put them in the primary. Oftentimes they lose it in their aroma kind of going out of the mead. So let's get started. The first things first, we have to, of course, start our yeast. That's the thing that takes the longest, so let's go ahead and start that. Alright, so the first thing I need to do is get this water going to about 109 degrees, where it'll sit for a long time, and I'll try to have to keep it at 109 degrees. So we'll get that going, and while that is going, the water's getting hot, we can go ahead and start getting our yeast and, our honey and our water mixed. Alright, so I'm using this Desert Creek honey. It's in Texas. This is 12 pounds. I'm not going to use all of it. I'm only going to use about 3 pounds of it. So, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go ahead and just draw a line and say that that's about 3 pounds. And this is 12, then ultimately that should be about 3. And then we can, of course, test our gravity to be sure. So let's go ahead and mix some of our honey and water while we're waiting. Alright, so now the water is up to about 109 degrees, which is where we need to be, so I can take and put my yeast in. I'm using the Lavlin 71B 112 yeast. It was, it was listed on the recipe, and I just so happen to have it here of my yeast choices. So, we're going to take and mix it in. Now, something that I read and heard on a podcast about yeast is to don't worry about mixing the yeast too much, and that's why I'm not worried too much about it right now. I'm gonna just let it sit for a little bit, and then we'll let it activate. It'll sit there for about 30 minutes before I end up putting it into the actual mead. So I'll put my timer on for 30 minutes. Now I can get back to mixing my water and my honey. Alright, another thing that I forgot to mention is I actually can put in my GoFirm Protect, which is going to help the the yeast rehydrate properly and get where they need to be. So I need to put about 6 grams into this because it's 1.25 grams per 1 gram of yeast. So doing the math, ultimately comes out to 6.25. So I need 6.25 grams of this. So I'm going to put that in here. Alright, now that I've put that in there, I'm also going to put in this Fermade K, which also gives us more nutrients, the yeast more nutrients, so that they can do a better job of conforming and changing all of the honey into the alcohol. So there are certain nutrients within the honey, but generally they also need other sources of nutrients. So this is a great way to help them do that. And by introducing this into the yeast water initially, you're allowing for the yeast to take in the nutrients into their actual cell, as opposed to whenever you put in yeast nutrient post into your must, or excuse me, into like your actual mead over a couple weeks. Sometimes it can actually damage the cells of the yeast, which I think is kind of interesting. So this allows them to soak them in initially. And I need, for this, I need 1 gram per gallon. So I don't really need a lot of this. This is a small amount, but it will greatly help. Now that I have these things in here, I'm going to go ahead and stir these in, actually, because I want them to break in and mix in with the yeast. And overall, I'm trying to keep this at 109 degrees, so I have this set on real low, and hopefully it will actually start to stay there. We can double check. It's perfect. My yeast water is at exactly 109 degrees and it's just sitting there, so that's awesome. So let's get back to mixing the... So far I've used, I would say, about 1.5 pounds of my honey. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix in some more, so I need to get some water in first. Alright, now, so I have all my honey water, or my must, mixed together. Now, a couple things about this mead that are kind of important. With the recipe I saw, it was for a bigger batch, and so I decided to go ahead and make it smaller. And my way of making it smaller is just kind of cutting down certain things. So I'm using 3 pounds of this Texas honey, this Desert Creek honey, 3 pounds of that, and then I have, of course, my yeast, which we said earlier was the Lavlin 71B112. This yeast that is recommended, and I really like to for this. And ultimately, I'm going to use, excuse me, about 4 pounds of strawberries that are going to be raw, of course, and then about 2 pounds of bananas. Those are going to go into the secondary. Now, there's a couple reasons I'm doing that. One is because I, selfishly, didn't want to spend $20 on strawberries, which where I'm at right now and where I live, for 4 pounds of strawberries, it's $20. I was like, oh my goodness. So hopefully I'll find a cheaper alternative by the time the secondary fermentation comes around. And then also, I think that ultimately the flavor is going to come through better if I put it into the secondary part. So a couple of things for if you are interested in doing mead, you have a few major steps. The first step you have to do, of course, is to get your ingredients, whatever you need for your mead. So in this case, all the stuff I said. Your first step of actually making the mead is I would always start your yeast water, like we have going right now. That needs to go for about 25 minutes. You need to keep it at a good temperature, about 110 degrees. Use a certain amount of water and then your yeast packet. Now, depending on how big of a production you're going for, you might need a couple packets of yeast. I've never had to do that. I've only used one ever. So you start that. Once you have that going, you can start mixing your water. So the first step was to start your yeast. Second step, mix your honey and your water. Now you can heat up the water however you want, in whatever way, that's totally fine. And then from there, the third step, once you have all these things mixed, you need to go ahead and acclimate the yeast water. So whenever the yeast water is ready, it's been sitting for about 30 minutes, you don't want to just throw it in, because the best comparison for throwing yeast water straight into the mead is like if you found someone who was extremely dehydrated to the point of, whatever. The worst thing you can do, and for them, is to just start chugging water, because while water is good for you in moderation, it can kill you. In that case, it might really hurt that person. Same thing for the yeast. So whenever the yeast get too much honey, it's kind of like that person who has got too much water. And so what you want to do is go ahead and take some of your must and slowly kind of acclimate them, both in temperature and of course the concentration and the gravity. So that's what we're going to do in just a few minutes. We're going to take some of our must, and we're going to put it in here. Now this still has to sit for about 20 minutes, or so. It doesn't take very long to do this part. So we'll come back in a second whenever this yeast water is ready to be further acclimated, and then we can get going from there. But if you are interested in doing mead stuff, follow those 3 steps I said, and then of course ask questions, look up books, look at whatever. Mead's super fun. Let's wait and see how this is going to go. Okay, so one thing I can do while I'm waiting is take a gravity check. However, my problem is, as I've experienced before, I don't have something that's tall enough for this to set in. If I set this down here right now, it's not going to, it's going to hit the bottom before I can get a good reading. So what I'm going to do is move this must into here for just a moment. So this will sit a little taller, and then I can get a better reading. So I'm going to do that. Now that this is tall enough, I guarantee you this will work. You can go drop it in. Alright, it's floating, and it is floating at 1.07. So, that is our ABV for the moment. That will, of course, excuse me, not ABV, our gravity for the time being. I'm going to put this back in, and then we'll go ahead and put the yeast in, or go ahead and start mixing that yeast around, because that will... Okay, so this is ready to start cooling down. So I'm going to go ahead and move it off of the thing that was keeping it warm. And what I can do is, since I had this in here, I'm going to go ahead and put some... I'm just going to go and pour it lightly. Now, like I said, this is, you're only putting a little bit. You're trying to cool down the the yeast water to where it is closer to room temperature, so that when you put them together, they're close. But also acclimate the yeast to where they have enough idea of what they're going into with as far as the sugar content and the gravity, and it kind of gets them closer. So I'm going to keep adding this over time, and I won't do it all on video because it's very repetitive. So I'll be back in just a few minutes when it's close to room temperature. Okay, so I've let this sit for about 30 minutes, and it's down to about 73 or 74 degrees. And so that is the same temperature as our must. I'm gonna go ahead and mix it into our must. Okay, so now we're all mixed in. The last step with this is I need to aerate the must. I can do that by mixing. You can do that by a bunch of different processes. The process I'm gonna use, I'm gonna mix it some, and then I'm also gonna use my little machine, which I'll grab here in a second. But first, let me give it a little mix. Alright, so I have put in my little machine. Basically, it is a little oxygen pumper. And so what you do is you put it into the must, and there is what's called an oxygen stone at the end, which puts oxygen, of course, into it. And now, in order to really aerate the must for long enough, I have to put this in for a long time, probably a good hour. But the thing to know about oxygenating your must is that you want to be real careful when you introduce your yeast into it, that you don't, of course, kind of freak out the yeast if you're sitting there stirring like crazy. So the best time to oxygenate is whenever there is no yeast involved, and you can shake it and do whatever. I would highly suggest, if you are doing mead stuff, having a 1 gallon carboy to shake in. That does a lot of good for the must. It helps mix everything well too. So I'm going to let this sit for about, let's say 45 minutes to an hour, and then I'll put it, put the lid on, and of course put the airlock and all that stuff, and it'll sit for a while. So that is this part of this. Alright, so that's got to sit for a little while. I'm going to remind you guys about the giveaway. The giveaway was started around Christmas time. You will ultimately get, and I'll make sure to link you to the video so you can watch that as well. It is a mead starter kit. And of course I'll have you guys watch that video again if you haven't already seen it. That's the best way to see what's happening within that video. So go over and do that. There's a couple of steps. It's real easy. You just need to follow. There is, you have to like and comment on the video, say something like I'm in, and then follow my Twitter and follow my Instagram, which of course I'll put links in below. So I highly suggest that you do that, because it would be awesome to have a mead kit, even if you already do mead stuff. So it's free honey, free whatever, stuff like that. But this mead, like I said, is going to put the strawberries and the bananas and all that stuff into the secondary, which will be fine. it should be great in the end. The alcohol volume came out to 1.06 or 1.07-ish. And that will be, sorry, not the alcohol volume, the gravity came out to that, which hopefully by the time we go into secondary fermentation, that is at 0 or 1, and then we'll introduce everything else. So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed. If you are a beginner mead maker, I hope this video helped you in some way. Please follow me, subscribe to my channel, like all this stuff. I really enjoy seeing you guys comment, have questions, or fixing something that I've said. So I'm by no means the expert or foremost authority on mead. There are a lot of smarter people than me. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.